home after looking after my father, the first thing I did, and running over to Gwen's house, the next thing I did was I sought out the NAACP. I knew they were the premier civil rights organization in Jacksonville. And the director of the NAACP at that time, I want to think, was a Reverend Britt, Reverend K.D. Britt, pastor of Second Baptist Church. I went and I talked to him, and I asked him if the NAACP was engaged in any kind of anti-discrimination efforts in the city of Jacksonville. And he very calmly told me that the adult branch of the Jacksonville NAACP could not engage in those kinds of things because all of the members worked for white people, and if they engaged in any of those kind of protest demonstrations, they would immediately lose their jobs. Well, it made sense. That made good sense to me. But I couldn't understand why the black preachers, ministers, who did not work, for the most part, for white people, but worked for black people and earned their living through their churches, I didn't understand why they weren't more involved. But Reverend Britt suggested to me that I go out to Davis Street School and talk to a young teacher out there whose name was Rutledge Pearson. He said, Mr. Pearson is involved with an NAACP youth council, and you might want to go and talk with him. I went out to the school, and I met Mr. Pearson, talked with him. He says, yes, he says, we are interested in some direct confrontation, nonviolent. He said, the students at North Carolina A&T had been demonstrating at some Woolworth stores, and we would like to do sit-in demonstrations here. He introduced me to one of his students, Rodney Hurst. Rodney had recently been, well, was about to be elected president of the NAACP Youth Council. They were holding elections. I immediately joined. Rodney was elected president, and I was elected vice president. I had to be involved, and just knew that I had to be involved. And on August 13th, we staged our first sit-in demonstration. Now, prior to staging that demonstration, we met at Laura Street Presbyterian Church. Our mass meetings were held there at the time. We sang freedom songs, we prayed, we talked, we won each other's confidence, we listened to Mr. Pearson, we heard about the dangers that might exist, we pledged ourselves to nonviolent participation in the movement, and we were ready. We decided that we were ready. On August 13th, 6 days before my wedding, we staged our first sit-in demonstration at Woolworth at Hemming Plaza. The following week, we went back again. Not very much happened. We'd sit at the lunch counter and they would immediately close it down. Well, we found out after the demonstration on the 13th of August that if they closed the lunch counter down and we immediately got up and left and went back to the church, then they would simply reopen the lunch counter and still have an opportunity to serve the lunch crowd. Well, we became wiser. On that next demonstration, we sat at the lunch counter. They closed the counter, and we sat and sat and sat until the lunch hour was over. They couldn't reopen it. When we went back on the 27th, our initial intention was to sit in at Woolworth, but Rutledge Pearson and some of the others, Arnett Gerardo, came back to the church where the youth were, and they told us that they had driven past Hemming Park and that there were a bunch of white men, some in Confederate uniforms, handing out baseball bats and axe handles. And there was a sign posted on one of the trucks, "Get your free axe handles here." They noted that there were no police officers anywhere in sight. At some point, you would think that, with demonstrations going on and these people gathered, that somebody would have alerted the police. And I'll tell you how we learned later on that the police were alerted. But at any rate, Mr. Pearson decided, well, they're too close to the Woolworth store. They're right across from the Woolworth store. We won't go there. We'll go to the W.T. Grant store instead, which was on Main Street, and we could march down Church Street far enough away from where the men were gathered with the axe handles so that they couldn't see us, and we could get into the W.T. Grant store and we could hold our demonstration there. Well, somehow they spotted the kids. It was a line of us. There were about 40 of us. They spotted the kids as they were approaching the W.T. Grant store. And these men immediately, with their baseball bats, started charging toward them. And the kids broke and ran. Well, the second wave of us, my group, doubled back, and we went into the Woolworth store because nobody there. They were all chasing the kids down Main Street. Just about the time we got seated, they came in with their baseball bats and they went to work on us. The fighting, just any person of color, had nothing to do with the NAACP Youth Council. If you were a person of color and you were in that vicinity, you got beaten. It was a bloody day in Jacksonville, but it was, in my opinion, it was the incident that started Jacksonville on the road towards sanity, believe me. Rutledge Pearson, the school teacher, as that says a lot. It says a lot about school teachers. Rutledge Pearson talked to us about Mahatma Gandhi and the movement that he led, and how Gandhi talked to the people of India and told them that if they struck out in violence, there could be no winners, and that the only way that good could triumph over evil was that good didn't stoop to the level of evil. Nonviolence was the way, and the world would see that peaceful nonviolent people were simply asking for equal access and equal opportunity. And the way Mr. Pearson actually taught us, instructed us, and counseled us, when you walked out of that church, you did not want to lift a hand against anybody. We walked out of there knowing, after being told, but knowing that God was on our side and we couldn't lose. And as a result of that, we couldn't lift our hand in anger against anybody. Even those folk who were trying their best to do whatever carnage they could to us with the axe handles, we couldn't. We couldn't.